Thank you all for being here today. If you are streaming live, we are really excited to present to you an outstanding musician and an even better person, ex-student of mine, Dr. David Constantine from the United States Marine Corps, the President's Own. David, thank you for coming to our broadcast today.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, when a form went out, one of the questions that people wanted to find out about is what it's like to be in a professional band. Of course, the first band I thought of is the President's Own, which is, in my consideration, the best band in the country. And then I thought of you, since I had that one-on-one connection. So Dave, why don't you go ahead, before we start talking about the President's Own, tell me a little bit about how you started the music and your educational background.
Sure. I started playing when I was in third grade, so it's been a long time, and went all the way through middle school, high school, did marching band, did pretty much everything I could do, jazz band, all that stuff. And then I went to the University of Oregon and got my Bachelors and Masters, both in percussion performance with Charles Dowd, and then went on to Indiana University where I got my doctorate in percussion performance, studied from a whole bunch of different teachers there. And along that road, I was playing in some regional orchestras, principal timpani and percussion, and maybe 4 or 5 different orchestras in Indiana. And toward the end of that time, I took an audition with the Syracuse Symphony and won a position as the assistant timpanist and section percussion. And so we dropped everything and moved to Syracuse. And little did I know that they were on their road to bankruptcy. And we were there for about 1.5 years, and they locked the doors and everybody lost their jobs. And I remember that was on a Tuesday. And on Thursday, I got the International Musician in the mail, and the President's Own job was posted. And I was like, there's no option here. I have to have this job. So I spent, that was the beginning of April. I spent from April to August practicing all day, every day, preparing for the audition, and came to DC and took and won the audition. And I've been here for just over 9 years.
So when you did that audition, first of all, you were practicing from April to August just for that audition?
Mm-hmm.
So what were some of the things that you were practicing on to get ready for the audition?
Well, with all professional orchestral auditions, and this is run very similarly to an orchestral audition, they'll send out a repertoire list and a packet of excerpts for you to practice. And what made this audition different from any orchestra audition that I've taken was that, of course, it's a band. So there was band repertoire, things that I had not been familiar with. And one thing that I did to prepare was I drove back to Bloomington and went to the band library and got the parts for every band piece that was on the audition. And I learned every part for every piece in its entirety, not just the excerpts. And
so when you said every band piece, like for every percussion part?
Every percussion part for every piece that was on the audition list, okay, and every mallet part that I could find in their music library. And I got copies of everything and just practiced and was preparing for whatever sight reading they could throw my way, or anything else. And I was spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day practicing on this repertoire, on everything from drum set, timpani, marimba, xylophone, bells, snare drum, all the accessory percussion. I mean, there was everything on that list.
So after that, it was a long time to practice just for that one audition. Were you scared or nervous when you walked into the audition?
I was, yes, but it was a little bit different than usual. I found out the day before the audition, I was packing up my gear to come down, and my wife came down into my studio and said, "You better win this audition tomorrow because we're going to have a baby." So that added some new pressure. There was no option. I just had to win. And so, yes, I was nervous for it, but I was also very determined, and there was just no option other than to come away with the job.
Well, and it sounds like you were really prepared.
I was really prepared, and to go back to the education for a second, I spent 7 or 8 years studying with Charles Dowd in Eugene, and his biggest thing was to always be the most prepared player at the gig or at the audition. very seldom will go to the best player, but it'll always go to the most prepared player. And so I wanted to put myself in that position. And as a matter of fact, when the sight reading came up in the audition, for me, none of it was sight reading because I had practiced all of those parts ahead of time. I didn't know that's what they were going to ask for, but I had seen it all before.
So when you walked into the audition, tell us what the audition was actually like to get into the band.
So there were 3 rounds to this audition. The first 2 rounds were behind a curtain, so they couldn't see you. You weren't allowed to talk. They had carpet down, so they couldn't tell what kind of shoes you were, basically to make it as fair as possible. And in the rehearsal hall, there was a line down the side of the room with every instrument that was on the audition, and it started with marimba on one end, down all the mallet instruments to the battery percussion, and then drum set and timpani. And out of the entire list, they asked for a couple of things on each instrument. So I started out playing a Bach marimba solo and moved my way on down. And it started with 55 people auditioning for the one spot. So there were 54 other percussionists there. Some people I knew and a lot that I didn't. And so we waited around all day. That round started at 7 a.m. So everybody showed up and got a number for the day. And let's say I drew number 39, I don't remember. But at the very end of the day, they'd say, okay, tomorrow we want these 10 players to come back. And I made the cut. They also said that tomorrow morning we're having a band rehearsal and we'd like to invite all of you to come and hear the rehearsal. And I thought, wow, this is my chance to hear the space and to hear the band and watch what they're doing and the other players and figure out how I can make my playing in the next 2 rounds really line up with what they are looking for. And I was the only person of the 10 advanced players that went to that rehearsal. I was the only one.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I did that, and then they cleaned up, and after lunch, the second round of the audition, very similar. There was a screen up the line of instruments. They had to go down the list again, even more excerpts this time. And from there, they cut it down to 3 players. And immediately when that round was over, they started the third and final round. And at that point, they took down the screen. And at a big, long series of tables, there were all 5 officers in the band, all the section commanders, and then whoever from the percussion sections. There were 15 or 20 people sitting in front of me. And again, I started at one end, and now there was sight reading also mixed in on the mallet instruments and everything else. And with the drum set portion, they had a live trio there for me to play with and trade soloing with to see how I interacted with those other musicians. And I also forgot to mention, after the first round, they also had an interview. And we have to, in the Marine Band, our physical requirements are only that we have to make weight. Basically, we don't have a physical training component, but we still have to look good in our uniforms and meet military standards of height and weight requirements. So we had to get on the scale and do an interview with the executive officer. And I'd say overall, it was the most difficult audition process that I'd ever taken part in. But I also feel very strongly that it was the most fair audition process that I'd ever taken part in. They looked at everything. They had a chance to talk to you, to work with you in that final round. And they let you play everything that they asked for. Whereas in some orchestral auditions, you could show up and play for 30 seconds. And they'd be like, okay, thank you. That's enough. Bye. Yeah. And you could drive or fly halfway across the country for 30 seconds of playing, and that's that. But here they actually wanted to hear you play.
I think the thing that I'm thinking of is, in getting this information to the students, is that you were prepared. And you did more than what was asked for the audition by going to that rehearsal, because you never know if that had any influence for the officers that saw you at the rehearsal, then saw you at the audition, that you have the commitment to doing a great job.
Exactly. And one other step that I took was I got a hold of the principal percussionist in the band, who was really good friends with John Tafoya, who I was studying with at Indiana. Well, it turns out the percussionist was doing a clinic in Bloomington that summer. So I drove back to Bloomington from Syracuse and watched his clinic that he was giving on Sousa percussion parts. and band percussion. And he had brought up a couple parts. For example, Saber and Spurs, Sousa March is the only Sousa March that has a xylophone part. And he kind of looked at me and gave me a little wink. And that's not cheating in any way. That's just him saying, hey, here's a special part you might want to have on your radar. And so, of course, I went and I got the part and learned it. And that was one of the sight reading excerpts.
Oh,
so
sight reading.
That was one of the sight reading excerpts. So I hadn't memorized or anything. I touched on it just a little bit, but I knew that it existed, which that, along with all my other levels of preparation, just gave me the best chance that I could have.
And you knew what they were looking for, like the style of how to play a Sousa March, for example.
Right. And yeah, I knew a little bit more of the styles. I was playing along with Marine Band recordings. And again, one further level, when they had Sousa snare drum parts on the audition list, I also learned the bass drum part and the cymbal part. And I also learned playing bass drum and cymbals together because I'd seen on some videos that was something that they did. And sure enough, in the final round, they said, okay, we don't want to hear Stars and Stripes on snare drum. We want you to play bass drum and cymbals together now. Okay, no problem, right? I mean,
yeah.
So just getting all that stuff plugged in.
Great. So being prepared, I think that is paramount to you get one of the things to getting you the job. So with the President's Own, what do you see the difference or the differences are of playing in a symphony like you did with Syracuse, for example, and the President's Own? What are the major differences?
The major difference for me as a percussionist, speaking specifically, but I guess for all of the musicians in the band, and there are 155, 160 musicians, is that we have to be prepared to play any style of music at any time. And for me as a percussionist, I have to be prepared to play any instrument at any time. So I'm not just playing marimba or timpani or snare drum or drum set. I might be playing marimba this week, and at the same time as that, preparing a concert folder on timpani the week after that. And in the midst of those rehearsals, I might go to the White House and play combo jazz, or I might put on a rope drum and do a ceremony or march for a funeral in Arlington Cemetery. So I'm really tasked with doing all sorts of different things. Whereas my experience in an orchestra is that you're kind of, everybody has a specialty, and you're usually kept to that specialty. So in Syracuse, I was the drum set snare drum guy. That's what I did. In other orchestras, I only played timpani. There's usually a mallet person or a cymbal person. But here we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and those are used to the band's advantage. But we all play everything. And
you're a true percussionist.
I'm a true percussionist, and it keeps me on my toes and goes back to that being prepared. And that's one of the challenges that creates is I might go 10 or 12 weeks without touching a marimba in the band, but when that folder comes across my music stand, I've got to be ready in a matter of days to play it. And in some cases, we don't rehearse and we just show up and sight read things. And so being prepared on every instrument all the time for whatever comes at me is a challenge.
So we're talking about when the music comes across your stand, that's what you have. Who decides who plays what parts in the percussion section?
Well, we have different levels of a different hierarchy of leadership throughout the band. So each large section will have a section commander. And then, so for example, high brass will have a section commander, low brass will have a section commander. And for us, the percussion section, we have a section commander, even though we are only one section, but there's 12 percussionists. So we have him, and then we have the principal percussionist, and then we have the section leader. And the principal percussionist is in charge of musical duties and assignments, and the section the section leader is in charge of more of the bookkeeping and scheduling. So he will decide who is going to play which commitments, and then he sends those names to the principal percussionist, and he decides who will play which parts.
Okay. So what are rehearsals like with the band? Let's say you have a concert coming up in a week.
So for our standard concert series in the winter, we'll have a one concert in a week. So we'll have a Sunday matinee, and we'll have 4 rehearsals Tuesday through Friday, 2.5 to 3 hour rehearsals. And we usually start off by doing a reading of each piece and then work through them just like any other standard rehearsal, but it's much more compact than maybe in a high school or a college situation. And what makes it even more different is that we oftentimes will have school groups come in and watch our rehearsals. That could be the last rehearsal, or it could be the first thing on the first rehearsal, which makes that first rehearsal not a reading rehearsal, it makes it a performance.
Yeah.
So like being prepared on any instrument, we have to be prepared 100% before that first rehearsal shows up, because that first rehearsal may be a performance.
Do you remember your first rehearsal and what you were thinking, or your first concert with the band?
I do remember the first concert, and the very first thing I got was the mallet book, which I'm okay with. It's not my favorite thing, but I do the best that I can. And I remember we did the finale from Copland's Third Symphony, and in the band setting, as many of you know, when you're doing an orchestral transcription, where do a lot of the string parts go? Well, they go to the mallet percussion. So there was this xylophone part that was basically the first violin part for this entire thing. And I'm shedding and I'm learning and get into the first rehearsal, and I'm nervous because it's my first time playing in front of these other guys. It's my first time in front of the conductor with this band, and it's just really intense. And the biggest challenge that I ran into was that with the band, there's no delay. The conductor puts the baton down and there's sound. With an orchestra, there's always a slight delay. The string players are always behind, and that was a learning curve. And then showing up straight out of the orchestral world, that's what I wasn't as prepared for. And this band is so large that on top of not having that sound delay, the xylophone, we play on risers. So the woodwinds are on the floor, and the brass is on a riser, and the percussion is on a riser behind them. And I was on the mallet instruments, a second tier behind that. So I was 40 feet from the conductor. So there was that delay. And just learning how to play more on top, I felt like I had to play at least a 16th note ahead of where I felt like I needed to be. But when I went back and listened to that recording, it was right on. So that was,
wow.
On top of the nerves, it was very strange.
How long did it take you to realize that you had to play a 16th of a second difference?
I had to do it pretty quickly. I didn't want to continue being asked, but the Colonel Coburn at the time, stopped the band. He's like, "Okay, David, you're really behind." And we did it again. He's like, "Okay, you're still behind." So then I, really tried to play on top where I couldn't even hear anybody else. It was almost like I was playing before the band. And it was very strange, but when I went back and listened, it was right on. So it took me that one rehearsal to figure that out.
Something that you and I talked about that I found interesting is the instruments and what you're provided with being in the President's Zone. And so is it true you get the instruments are provided for you, reed sticks, is that correct?
Yeah, everything that we need to do our duties as a military ensemble. And it's true of any other branch of the military. Anything that you need to do your work in the military is provided to you, from your uniforms to instruments, drum head sticks, reeds, mouthpieces, horns, violin bows, strings, guitar amps, everything. And if they don't have it, then for a specific concert, let's say you need a specialty instrument, they can rent it or buy it. So we have a huge arsenal of instruments. There's mallet instruments and timpani all over the place. And of course I can bring any of my own instruments that I want to, but and the sticks and mallets, that's expendable. It's like a reed. It doesn't last forever. But when I leave, of course, it's the property of the band and that goes back to the band. But for my time here, that goes into my stick bag. And but yeah, anything that we need, and the wind players as well, they could, somebody new comes in and says, I really love playing this Yamaha trumpet. Can we get a couple in to try? And they'll order a bunch and try them out, and you pick the instrument that you want to play.
Wow, that's great. Let me get back to a little bit we talked about earlier with performances and all the different performances. So you did play in the inauguration, is that correct? For
Yep.
Biden. What's it like to play in an inauguration?
It's very special, and this was my first time playing in the ceremonial band. I've done the parade and the inaugural balls in years past, but this is the first time I was on the platform, and it was different for me in that I hadn't done a job like that, but also that it wasn't the standard inaugural. I mean, there were no people down there. But what was really cool about it was, and you could see it on TV, but the band is right in front of where the president-elect is. I mean, he was right there, and Lady Gaga was right there, and be there and witness that firsthand was very special. And it's a very long day to do that job, but not many people can say that they can be a part of that.
Oh yeah. And what about the performing in the White House? That's one of the things that you also brought up. What's it like to perform in the White House for any type of occasion?
Well, I'll start out by saying that most of the performances we do in the White House are in the grand foyer. So if you're looking at a picture of the north side of the White House, you see the big chandelier and the pillars, and there's the double doors. If you open those double doors, the chamber orchestra would be right there. So with me playing with the chamber orchestra, they only send one percussionist. So it's me at a drum set with a set of bells and a duffel bag with tambourine and triangle and everything that I need. And I would be set up basically right to off the conductor's right side. So I'm right by that door. And if we're playing for a state dinner or something, and the guest of honor and the president are walking in through that door, and the press or whoever else, they walk literally right by me. So that's one scenario. Another scenario would be if the president is out in the Rose Garden making an announcement, and he's standing outside of the Oval Office like you often see on TV. And if those news cameras did a 180-degree turn, there would usually be a jazz combo sitting there playing. So we play for those types of situations as well. And we do things like they'll do a spring and a fall garden tour where the public can get tickets and come tour the grounds, and an Easter egg roll, and we'll set up a full concert band outside and play for several hours.
Well, what is your favorite White House memory or performance?
There's so many. I'd say one of them was I'm losing my train of thought all of a sudden. President Obama's second inauguration was my first inauguration with the band, and I played one of the inaugural balls at the White House late that night. So we're sitting here with the jazz combo playing, and lots of famous people and musicians and artists and whoever big name people are there, and we're playing, and all of a sudden the pianist looks over me, hey, check over there, and there's Herbie Hancock standing right in front of us checking it out, and we invited him to come over and play with us. And so I got to play with Herbie Hancock in the White House with the president's jazz combo.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That's the memory you'll have for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Someone had a question, getting back to the inaugural. It's from Southridge High School, the band director there, Cameron Jurdy. How difficult was it for the band to tune in that weather? Because it seemed to be pretty cold out there.
It was a challenge, I think. But one of the things that always blows me away is how well we can play in any situation, whether we're in the middle of the summer playing a concert, the band is in tune. Whether we're marching for a funeral, the band is in tune. And at a funeral situation, for example, during the service, we're just standing there. It could be 20 degrees or it could be 100 degrees. And then out of nowhere, the trumpet player has to walk out and play taps after standing for 5 minutes without moving a muscle or blowing air through the horn. And every time they sound like $1,000,000. So I don't know how they do it. I was only playing bass drum, not only, but I didn't have much in terms of tuning to deal with. But yeah, it's a whole different challenge.
One of the things that I think is great about the Marine Band is that you go on tour. And I think it was 2 years ago, we were fortunate to have the President's Own playing in Oregon. Mm-hmm. So what's it like to go on tour with the Marine Band?
I enjoy it quite a lot. It's hard to be away for that long, but we do our 30-day tour to different areas around the country. And for me, I just love seeing different parts of the country. We, on a 31-day tour, will play 29 concerts, each concert in a different city. So we'll play a concert, go back to the hotel, get up first thing, get on the bus, go to the next venue, play a concert. Every 10 days, we have one rest day. And during that time, we have 3 different programs that we've prepared. So every night we're playing a different program. And within those, we change out certain aspects depending on if we're in a different, if there's some piece of music that's special or a Sousa march that's special for that region or that city or that school. So it just keeps us on our toes, but it's really cool to be a part of that and to spend time with your colleagues kind of on a different level than we would normally.
When you talk about Sousa marches, which is, of course, one of the things that the President's Own is known for, what is your favorite Sousa march to play?
Oh, boy. I would actually say the Saber and Spurs is my favorite Sousa march. It just kind of has a special place for me because it was on the audition, and then I got to the year before we were in Oregon play the Mallet Book on tour, and that was on there, so I had the xylophone solo then as well. But that's one of my favorites. It's just a little bit different than other Sousa marches, and it's unique, and it kind of holds a special place for me.
With pieces, and we talked about Sousa march, and you've got such a wide repertoire with the President's Own. What is the hardest piece you've ever performed with the Marine Band?
Oh boy. That's so hard to say because we play so many different pieces and new commissions. And I remember this Gandolfi piece several years ago that we were using 9 or 10 percussionists back there, and we're all running back and forth, and we've got 2 marimbas and 2 vibraphones and all sorts of stuff set up. But that was, I don't remember the title off the top of my head right now, but that was one of the more challenging performances.
Put Ike there. I had a question for Ike. That's from a previous one. I should have said I had a question for David. So if you do have a question that you would like to ask David, please put it in the chat room. Okay, another question I had is, if you wanted to, if someone's interested in performing or auditioning for the Marine Band, what type of advice would you give that person if they wanted to audition for a professional band or orchestra?
My advice now is, like I said earlier, is to just be as prepared as you can, because it's, I know firsthand that the job, or even if you're auditioning for a chair in band or any audition that you're taking, it's going to go to the most prepared player. I still remember my audition. I did not play perfect audition. I remember the mistakes that I made. So me being prepared and showing that extra level of musicality, I'm fairly certain is what got me the job. And one thing that's different now than when I was growing up, even in high school or going into my undergrad years, was that now there's YouTube and Spotify and Apple Music and all sorts of streaming services. So if you want to go audition for the New York Philharmonic, for example, you can go online and see up-close performances. You can listen to hundreds of recordings. You can see clinics from the principal players, and all this stuff is available to you. So I would say just take advantage of all of those resources and study as in-depth as you can everything about the ensemble that you're going to audition for, and figure out how you can fit into what they already do.
What is your most memorable band performance with the President's Own or with the chamber group? I know we talked about the ball with Obama. Any other memorable performances you'd like to share?
One that sticks out in my mind is from that tour 2 years ago on the West Coast. We made it down to UCLA and had prepared some extra music for that performance, some John Williams music, because he lives in that area. And so we get on stage and we're getting ready to play the March from 1941. And the moderator's out there, and he's full house in the theater at UCLA, and said, we love playing John Williams music, and there was applause. And, the only thing that would make this more special is if John Williams were here himself to conduct. And John Williams walked out on stage and conducted us for the rest of the concert.
And you had no idea that was going to happen?
We knew, but it was the audience had no idea. It was a huge surprise.
Oh, that's really awesome. I was looking at, well, let's ask this question first. How often do openings come up with the President's Own? Because I would think that's a pretty good gig and people stay there.
People stay here. Most of us make full careers out of it. I fully plan to do 15 to 30 years here if I can do it. But there's about 160 musicians. So if you think about that, there's a lot of turnover. There's people here in all different walks of their career. So it's actually fairly consistently, we're having auditions for one instrument or another, not recently, of course, but I'm sure once everything goes back to normal, we'll have a slew of auditions come up, but it happens fairly frequently.
Well, again, looking on the website, if people aren't aware of the website, you need to check it out. And I'll post that in a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and post a couple more questions. This is from someone Kevin Soon, one of your ex-high school classmates in U of O. What lesson from your years in high school band still influence you in your job now?
Again, I'd go back to being well-rounded and being prepared. That was stuff that I was cluing into very early on in my musical career. And I remember one performance in high school where I got this crotale part. First of all, I had no idea what crotales were. I had to go find these instruments. So I went to Lewis and Clark and I borrowed 2 octaves of crotales. And I remember having them on the floor in my bedroom, and I'm learning and shedding this crazy part. And at the same time, we're preparing jazz band music and marching band music and all sorts of different things. And just like now, I don't just play one instrument, but we were in a learning situation there. So we were purposefully being put on different instruments, but learning how to appreciate and be proficient on all the different percussion instruments kind of skyrocketed me to where I am.
Right. I think that piece was Heroes Lost and Fallen.
Yep, exactly.
Yep. And the reason I picked that piece is because we had a very good percussion section. Here's another question. And this is, what aspects of your marching experience come into play most often with respect to the President's Own? So your high school or college marching band experiences.
Thanks, Micah. Good to see you on there. I think having a very high awareness of technique. Of course, on the marching field, there's different levels of technique, from your feet to body posture and how you're actually playing the instrument, but also how to listen in different ways to other players around you, to listen to the metronome, to watch a conductor in different situations. Here we're playing on the concert stage. We play outdoor concerts. We're marching. Granted, now I'm wearing a rope drum instead of something on a rigid harness, and it's a different style of playing. But just learning to have a very keen awareness of everything that's going on around you and learning how to fit in with that rather than to just be clued in on your own job.
Okay. I'm just going to get back to what we were talking about just very briefly, and that was the recordings that are available, and now music for John Philip Sousa marches are available to any high school band or any band. And if you haven't heard about this, go to the website. I think I have the website here. And if you go to this website, you'll be able to see all the different recordings and PDFs of scores and the parts for any Sousa piece.
Yep.
And along with that, if you're interested more about all the different options that you have with the President's Own, go to this webpage. Again, I just posted this down there. One thing I found out, I didn't realize, is that when the President's Own goes on tour, then you can request to have a musician come out and do a clinic with your band.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, you can actually, that's available all the time. And we just finished a series of Music in the High School series where we were each virtual, of course, doing clinics all around the country. I did a whole series of clinics all around a specific timpani clinic, but I've done percussion clinics. And that's something that you can request anytime during the year if you know somebody in the band that you want to have specifically do a clinic online or to come to you live when things get back to normal, or just anybody in general, you could always request that.
So if I wanted to have a trumpet player, in the band do a clinic, even though I don't know that trumpet player specifically, that's still a possibility?
Of course, yeah. You could go to the website and get in touch with the Office of Communications here, and they could put you in touch with a trumpet player and get the ball rolling on that, of course.
Oh, that's a great resource, and I'll put that on the OBDA page. Also, here's another question. This is from Chris McCurdy from Lake Ridge High School. When you record, what kinds of recording setups do you use, and how often do you record? When the band does our annual recording project, the CDs that you've all seen in your libraries there, we'll rehearse a little bit, and we actually go, our concert venue is off-site from where we rehearse. It's at the Northern Virginia Community College. It's a really nice stage that we go there, and we have our own recording lab, our recording technicians that go there and set up all the mics, and they've got a control room across the hallway, just tons of mics and equipment all over the place. I couldn't tell you exactly what equipment they're using because there's so much of it. But also each rehearsal, our band hall is wired for recording. So every rehearsal that we play is recorded, and almost instantly after that, you can go back and listen to that recording and figure out, what's working and what's not working. But as far as equipment, I can't tell you what they're using, but we record all the time. And when you record the next CD or album, whatever you still have, how often or how soon do you get the music, and what is the rehearsal process leading up to that recording?
It's actually pretty similar to any other concert. We get the music maybe a week or two before that first rehearsal. Other sections might get it earlier, but because we have a large section and there's different instruments, we have a librarian in the section that takes a big stack of music and divides it into the different parts and figures out how many players we need. So maybe a week or two before the first rehearsal, we'll rehearse 4 or 5 times, and then we'll head over and do a week of recording sessions.
Great. We have maybe 2 or 3 minutes left. So again, if anybody has a question you want to post in the chat room, please do so. When is the next time the band's coming out to Oregon? We don't get to see you very often. Or do you have any idea how far in advance our tour is set up?
Tours, I don't know exactly. I think this year we're going down to Florida and Texas, doing kind of the southeast corridor. But the country's in 5 zones, so it was 2019 we were in Oregon.
Yeah, I think that's right.
23, 2023, 2024. So a couple more years till we come back out.
And also, when that does happen, when you know the tours are going to be coming out this way, I suggest the band directors, if you want to host the Marine band, you should contact them and do that ahead of that time so you can be put on the radar, because it's really something special to actually host the Marine band.
Mm-hmm. And even if you can't host a concert and you're within close proximity of where the concert venue is, you could still have a musician or musicians out to do clinics. That's also another possibility.
Great. Well, our time is about up. Thank you so much, David, for taking your time. It's great to connect with you again after so many years, even though I did get a chance to see you 2 years ago when you're in Oregon. And it's always a delight to talk with you, and even more so to listen to the Marine Band and know that there is a future in music in this country because of bands like yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was my pleasure to be here today.
All right. And have a great rest of your day. And again, thank you for being here for this broadcast.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you.